You know what? We'll go ahead and get started. It's 2:01 for everyone else who's just joined us in the last moment. I'll go ahead and introduce myself and our guests of honor. My name is Roxy Moser. I am the Director of Immigration Services for Valley Medical Staffing and VIMA Staffing Partners. Uh, on the webinar today with us, we have the founder, CEO, and managing partner of Valley Medical Staffing and VIMA Staffing Partners. That's Michael Conley on your screen. Hello, Michael. And of course, the incredible attorney from Corporate Immigration Partners, the other Michael, Michael Hammond. Thank you for joining us.
Hey guys.
Great. For everyone who's, of course, on the call, as I mentioned, go ahead and drop a line in the chat or in the Q&A. Let us know where you're calling from or calling in from. Or if you have any particular questions you'd like us to address, we'll do our best towards the end of the session. For now, as we get started, we'll direct you to our screen here with our deck. The first thing I want to make mention of is that our objectives for today are, of course, to discuss the question, how will the current immigration executive orders that the Trump administration has been releasing affect me? So for those on the call, you may be interested in having visa sponsorship and coming to the U.S. You may be a student here getting your bachelor's or master's or what have you on an F1 visa and are interested in sponsorship. Or you may already be a VIMA or Valley employee or direct hire nurse. So there's lots of different scenarios that we're going to go over here today as much as we can, and we'll do our best to cover things. And the other focus of today's webinar is what is the status of retrogression and visa processing times and any sort of nuggets that Mike Hammond wants to share with us about how that's going with the USCIS. Okay, let's see. Go back one. Okay, so just real fast, for those who don't know our companies, I wanted to just let you know quickly who we are. Valley Medical Staffing was the original company that Mike Conley, of course, was the founder of in 2003, with VIMA Staffing Partners joining suit in 2006. For both these companies, we work with international nurses for more than 25 countries, certainly depending on the year and depending on our opportunities. People come to us from everywhere. We do direct hire and temp to hire opportunities in acute care facilities, and those are always changing. So if you're ever curious about what opportunities we have, you're more than welcome to register on our websites, and a recruiter will speak with you about what the current opportunities are. And maybe time permitting, Mike Conley, you can mention some of those later in the talk. We sponsor EB3 permanent residency green cards. Those are our primary visas, but we also work with TN for Canadian citizens, E3s for Australians. And of course, we do adjustment of status for those living inside the US who are maybe on F1 or TPS. We are the Joint Commission Gold Seal certified for both of our companies. So if there are any healthcare facilities out there right now listening, we are very proud of that distinction, as well as being proud of the certified ethical healthcare recruiter that we've gained from the Alliance for Ethical International Recruitment Practices, which is a CGFNS division. If you ever have questions about any of these things or are curious to speak with us, certainly reach out at careers@vmstaffing.com. And you can also find all of this information on our websites. So just a little bit of business. If you have questions specific today to the general topics, throw them in the Q&A section. I see here, Nyala, you say the chat is disabled. I'm sorry. No problem on the chat. Just use the Q&A section. And that seems to be working fine. Definitely throw your questions in there and we'll do our best. If you have case-specific questions for someone who's already been sponsored by Valley or VIMA, please email me and then myself and your case manager, Faylene Specht, from corporate immigration partners. She and I will determine who you need to speak to or and how we can get you that question answered. All right, we talked about our speakers today. I wanted to give Mike Conley a quick moment to say hello.
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 Um, Thank you very much for joining us today. Um, Today is a special presentation that we hope helps ease people's minds. It's been a little crazy around here um, for the last few months, and Michael Hammond and I hoped that you leave today's seminar feeling a little bit more secure and a little bit more hopeful. That's the goal. So thanks for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Michael. Michael Hammond, hello. How are you doing today?
Good, good. Glad to be here. Thanks, Roxy and Mike. I know it can be confusing with two mics on this call. A lot of people simply refer to us as the good-looking Mike and the other one, and then either of us will answer. So you can do it either way. But
they're going to
no,
take bets in the Q&A on who that is.
Oh yeah, no, I think it's obvious, with the hair.
Obviously.
But no, we're definitely here, hopefully, to give you some information that can put your mind at ease. Lots of moving parts, lots of things happening, and lots of noise around us. And so one of our goals is to give you information about the noise, but focus you back on what's important for you, and take it from there.
Excellent. Thank you. And to that end, we'll jump right in. We're going to talk about knowing your rights as a foreign national, especially, of course, for those living here in the U.S. And then after, we'll discuss what the current state of retrogression is. Moving forward, let's take it away. Michael Hammond, can you discuss any current executive orders that might affect some of these legal visa holders living here in the U.S.?
Yes, yes. So I'm going to do this a little bit backwards, but I think it's an appropriate way to cover it. There have been no executive orders issued or anything that has even been hinted at that is aimed at offshore international RNs. There have been no executive orders issued or aimed at F1 students. No executive orders about I-140s or perms or retrogression. So all of the topics that are the primary topics for those of us on this call, nothing has happened. It is the same as we were in last October, okay? Where we have seen executive orders is for individuals who might be on TPS. There's been a cancellation of a couple of countries that had been extended that then got canceled. Individuals that came in under one of the parole programs for the last year or so, those have been canceled. So for individuals that could be you or could be friends, there has been a lot of attention at TPS, at parole, humanitarian parole, and asylum. There was a new executive order issued in the last 2 days looking at I-45s. So as Roxy mentioned early on in the call, one of the things that Valley does is offers 485 adjustment of status processing for individuals here in the U.S. And there's a specific announcement. And if you only read the headline, that would potentially concern you. However, they made it very specific that they are looking at 485s for individuals who have previously been granted asylum. If you're someone in the U.S. and you're granted asylum, 1 year after being granted asylum, you can then file a 485, and they're looking at vetting those. Extreme vetting was a term they used last term, and I think they're going to use that again as well. But it's not 485s in general. It's not 485s that would be filed for you through your Valley employment. So nonetheless, one of the things that we've all seen a lot of are stories about being people having trouble at the border, right? We've all seen them. The people in Boston, the German permanent resident that came in and that was, supposedly held and waterboarded and ended up at Boston General Hospital from suffering from exposure, and then ultimately turned around and sent back to the Canadian that was turned away from performing at Carnegie Hall, and all kinds of stories. Almost every day, it seems like there's a story. What we have seen with our clients is that if you have the right paperwork, no one has had any issues. Now, there are people who may think they're okay, that may not be okay. For example, we have been tracking all the issues that are reputable reporting as to what the trends are for people who are having trouble at the border. And there's three things that have been kind of common that can be verified. One are individuals who've had a DUI, which would not necessarily create a problem for you if you're here in the US, but when you're traveling and coming in, they can claim that that is something that could keep you excludable from the US. Second thing is individuals who have any type of marijuana use, whether you're in a state where it's legal and you simply are posting on your website on a Saturday that you had a pop party after work at your house, and you've got pictures posted around the bonfire, and in your state that's 100% perfectly legal, to someone who may have picked up a ticket for having a minor possession in a state that may not be legal. It is still marijuana is still a federal crime to even possess. And so that has been a second thing that they have been focusing on. And then the third is anything who has projected any pro-Palestinian, what they would view as connection with any terrorist organizations. Those are the three things. Keep in mind that they have the right to look at your phone when you're coming in. That is nothing new. That's been around since post 9/11. So we're talking, 20 plus years. They look at your social media. If you've got teenagers traveling with you, their social media, the fact that you've erased it, maybe some posts that you posted about, hey, I support marijuana rights here in California, and I'm for issue 12 or whatever it was out there in Colorado. The fact that it's been erased, they can still see it. So if you've got any of those three things in your background, I would not be traveling. Whether you're a green card holder, an H-1, a student with a visa, somebody who has advanced parole, any of those things, I just would not travel. I think that right now it would be unsafe to travel. That is, however, a very narrow group of things. For most of you, none of those apply to you. Never had a DUI, you're not, a stoner, and you're, not pro Palestinian, pro terrorist organizations. If you are, we'd probably like to know about that so that we can suggest you work someplace else. But those are the things that are actually happening that we can verify at the border. There's something else that Roxy has put here on the list called the travel bans. For those who've been around here a while, there were travel bans imposed during the first term. None have been imposed yet. However, we expect them to come. There's charts that are available on the White House's website. They've got a group of countries that are in the red chart that they expect to ban any day now. Any day could mean anything in politics. It could be 30 days from now, who knows? There's then an orange chart of countries they potentially would like to ban. And then I think there's a third chart even. I personally went on and looked at the charts, and I was frankly dismayed at my level of lack of education, of even recognizing that some of the names on that country list, I didn't even know were countries. So do it yourself just to see if you're way smarter geographically than I am. But check that out. If you're from one of those countries, red chart or yellow chart, I would not travel. Because if you travel and then there's a ban that's imposed while you're gone, you're not getting back in. So look at the charts, see if your country's on there. If it is, travel at your own risk, but my advice would not be not to travel. However,
Mike, you mentioned You're saying don't travel if your country's on the red or
or yellow
orange,
list. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
or
Yeah. Or orange list. Yeah. The
but the
two,
yellow is they're being looked at,
yes,
but
exactly.
there's
And in this administration, looked at could mean I go from a Tuesday of looking at it to a Thursday of imposing it, putting on the other list. We just
yeah.
don't know. So I think there's risk. Obviously, the red has a much higher degree of risk, you know, because they've already said these are countries that we plan on banning. We just haven't done it yet, kind of a thing. Um, let's see, a couple other things about traveling. Aside from that, if you're a TN holder here and you don't have any issues like that in your background, in my opinion, you can travel just as freely as you could have, 2 months ago, 3 months ago. We're finding out there's almost always something behind the story, like the well-publicized conductor, musician that got turned away from Carnegie, was supposed to perform at Carnegie Hall the day after his entry. He admitted, if you read the whole story, that he didn't have any paperwork to come in. He didn't think that playing at Carnegie Hall, he could do that as a visitor. That's what he thought. Now, could they have worked with him and helped him and probably reached out and got like a company letter to allow him to work? Sure, they could have. They probably could have tried to make it happen, but they didn't. But he didn't have the right paperwork. It'd be like you as an RN showing up to get a TN at the border and not having proof of your license, not having a letter from the employer saying you're coming in on TN, and not having your visa screen, and then complaining they didn't let me come in and work as an RN. Okay, you didn't have your paperwork. You weren't prepared. You didn't have what you need. So I think as long as we're prepared, I think we're good. If you have questions and you're contemplating travel and you want to have individual questions answered, which is perfectly fine, reach out to Roxy, reach out to myself, and we'll be happy to walk you through your situation and give you some advice. Couple other topics on here. Fingerprinting, big question. The whole registration. Do I need to register? It goes in effect here I think at the end of next week. Here's the key. We have a nice, clear, easy rule for this. If you have an I-94 record, whether it's as a student, whether it's a TN, whether it's an H1, H4, whatever it is, if you have an I-94 card record, you do not need to register. You are exempt and you are covered already. If you have a child that is 13 when you entered, who now getting ready to turn 14, and you're reading the rule going, oh, it says that I have to register my child because they're now turning 14. If your child has an I-94 record, which they should, then whether they had that, the fact that they're turning 14 now and they didn't have biometrics before, doesn't matter. It's still okay. You don't need to do anything. So for 99% of you, that registration rule and the need to go there and register and then ultimately get fingerprinted is not going to apply to you because you have an I-94 card record. So good news on that. They've made it very simple, very straightforward. The fact that your I-94 might have expired and you only have a 797 approval, you still have an I-94 because you've got one on the bottom of your 797, okay? Or if you're in the 485 process and your I-94 expired, but you're now in the 45 process, you had an I-94, so you're covered. So there's going to be very limited. But again, if you think maybe you don't have an I-94 for some reason, you were entered in on something else, reach out to Roxy or reach out to myself and we can help. I think one of the things that's important to kind of understand, if you're TPS, if you're asylum, if you're DACA, there's potential additional things happening relative to you. Pay attention to what's happening. There are a lot of federal court cases been filed. For example, with the restriction on TPS, there's a potential hold on that. So it's all a moving. It changes from day to day. There are a lot of good groups that allow you to track all that. If you're not a part of one, I'd encourage you to get a part of one so you can keep educated about yourself on that. But the bottom line for 99% of you on this call, nothing that the Trump administration has done today has any bearing on you. And I think that's kind of the important kind of piece. Should we check the Q&A and see if there's questions about that right now? Because I know that's a hot topic.
There are not.
On that one, okay.
What will be no, there is. I'm sorry. I didn't scroll. So what will be the impact on consular processing nurses from the red list?
Well, the practical effect during the first ban was that you could not consular process.
So their petitions, if they are from a red country, may not go through. So long as there's
they would never even be scheduled for an interview. So their petition would still be there. And at some point in the future, if that ban gets lifted, that's what happened this last time. When the ban got lifted, people were able to move through. If you have a residency in some other country, maybe you have a spouse who's in another country, then there may be some things that we can do to move you to another consulate, to another country. If you're, say, a dual national, you would likely go through some sort of extreme vetting and long process, but the ban may not completely apply to you. So if you are in that circumstance, let us know, reach out to us so that we can look and see what other opportunities there might be for you.
Okay. A question, a very easy one to answer, are the Philippines on the red list?
They are not.
No.
They're not on any list except the good list. I made that up. There's not a good list, but if there was a good list, you'd be on the good list.
Yeah, we don't like those lists. How about my I-94 is from 2018, but I-485 was filed last February. Can I travel?
If you have an advanced parole, then you can travel. If you don't have an advanced parole, you cannot travel.
Okay. I believe you may have an advanced parole, and if you do not, then you can reach out to me and I'll discuss it with the attorney.
One of the things to keep in mind now about advanced parole is it now has a filing fee associated with it. It used to be free. It came with a 485, advanced parole and EAD, and there are now filing fees associated with it. This was not a Trump change. This was a Biden change. So,
okay, thank you for letting us know that. We'll make a note of that.
And I was going to point out on that last one that Nigeria is not on the red list, the orange, or the yellow list, even though in the first administration there was a travel ban on Nigeria.
Yeah, so take a look at the list. Can you, if you have the link up, can you throw it in the Q&A so people can download it from there? I don't have it up.
I've got it. So
okay, yeah. So
where do you want me to put
list
that
up there? And again, use it the way I used it. Use it to see what countries you recognize as countries, and then feel bad about your education if you're like me and go, I had no idea that was a country.
Okay.
Okay.
So another question before we move on is so once I get my I believe, Nyala, you're referring to your I-485 permit. You have an I-140 filed. Her question was, so once I get the permit to work with VEMA, I can travel with advanced parole. I think the question maybe perhaps is, can you explain when advanced parole is achieved and is it possible to travel?
Yeah, advanced paroles are something that comes with the I-485, and the I-485 is something that can be filed for individuals who are in the United States in lawful status, have never worked without permission for more than 180 days, and their priority date is current to the front of the line. And the front of the line is determined by what's called the date for filing chart. However, the USCIS only honors the date for filing chart usually about 3 or 4 months in the beginning of the year. And right now they're only honoring the final action date chart for filing of 485s. So basically, once you're eligible to file a 485 for all those reasons, you check those off, and yes, that is all me. Then you file a 485. As part of that filing of the 485, there's a particular application that goes in called a 131, and that's what gives you advanced parole, and that's what allows you to travel. So if you're trying to project, when do I think I'll be able to travel internationally? And let's say you expect your party date to become current in October of this year, so 6 months from now. The advanced paroles are taking about 6 months to get approved. So October 2025, you're eligible to file your 485 under my hypo. That means that sometime in next March or April, you should have advanced parole in your hand. And so you can look to travel sometime in, say, the spring, early summer of 2026. That's my projection.
Thank you, Mike. We will also review the dates for filing later in the webinar. I'm going to move us on to a little bit more on this topic, and then also so we can review things like what's happening with retrogression. So for those questions out there related to those to retrogression, we'll try to cover those shortly. In the meantime, Mike Conley, did you want to add anything to the current conversation that Mike Hammond, all the information he provided, and specifically with the next slide, I just put up some of the things we're talking about: social media, online presence, documents to carry. Anything to add there on your end?
I think a lot of it's going to be explained in the coming moments, but the number one thing to keep in mind is keep your paperwork straight, do everything properly. Don't put yourself at risk. They're looking for the low-hanging fruit right now. And low-hanging fruit is somebody who doesn't have their paperwork in order. And so that's everything we're talking about now, especially documents to carry with you. This is important stuff, because if you do get pulled over for some reason, you don't have all of your documentation, they can at least hassle you. And you don't even want to go through the hassle process. So I'll let Mike kind of go through this list.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. One of the things that I'm going to warn you about a little bit, if you go online and you Google know your rights or documents to carry living in the US, you're going to get a lot of great resources. The ACLU has a really good site with things. There's immigration legal resource. There's a lot of stuff out there. One of the things you have to keep in mind is that a lot of that information, though, is aimed toward individuals who are here in the US who are undocumented.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not you. So when they say things like you have the right, not to a law enforcement official, but to a immigration official, of simply taking the Fifth Amendment and saying, I don't have to show you anything, and refusing to speak. Okay, if you're undocumented, that may be the right answer, but you're not. You're documented. You have legal paperwork. You are here legally. And so the immigration officers have the right to look at your paperwork, and there's nothing you should be concerned about showing them of your paperwork. So if you filed a 485 and you have a 45 receipt and you've got an EAD card issued, show it to them. If you're a student and you've got an I-20, show it to them. There's nothing you're hiding. You're totally above board. You've got what you need, okay? So I'm not saying all those things are bad. There's a famous thing out there that everybody knows about called the red cards that you can actually download, and it actually is red, and it's got all about know your rights, and it's great. And there's nothing wrong with it, but it is, again, geared toward an individual that's not in your circumstances. So it's okay to read all that stuff, but take those and understand who their target audience is, and it's not you. So these documents that Roxy has put up here are the documents that would likely apply to you. You have a 994 record. And don't be someone who's like, well, it's all online and I don't have it. Well, download it. Save it. Save it in your, Apple Wallet or whatever. Or be like an old person like me and print it out on a piece of paper and put it in your pocket. Old people do that. And, that way it's, pull it out and it gets tattered and ratted. Well, print it out again next month, kind of a thing. I know a lot of people do not like to carry their passports with them because they're fear of losing their passports. I'm still saying in today's climate, carry your passport. If you are a U.S. citizen and you look like you might not be, I'd be carrying my passport with me just to avoid being hassled. I think that's one of our goals in today's climate is to avoid being hassled, avoid being, pulled out of my car, kind of a thing. So maybe go the extra mile and the attitude of, well, I don't have to do this. You could be right. You may not have to do something, but if you can provide something simple that you have and avoid the argument and avoid the issue, I believe you are much better off. That's my take on it.
Great. Thank you.
Any specific questions that came up in the Q&A about that?
Not specifically about documents, although I do just want to point out for anyone who's, of course, working with us, Vima or Valley, living here in the U.S., this document suggestion I will be sending to you, so you'll also have the capacity to review that at a later date. And some of the to Mike's point here, having copies of things just prepared, maybe sitting in your glove box, is a good idea. Even having, that set of copy of documents at home set aside, like Mike and Mike are saying, being prepared is really the best way to move forward, given that, like Mike is saying, you are prepared, you're here illegally doing the right thing. So thank you for that. Mike Conley, did you want to add anything before we move on?
Yeah, there's a question here that I think is relevant for a lot of our folks that have been going through the new grad program with us. And it's, is there a concern for individuals with F1, which has expired, but I-485 has been filed, there's an EAD and advanced parole approved, and waiting for a priority date to be current? Is having an expired F1 a concern in that case?
In my opinion, no concern whatsoever. You are
So long as you have all
valid.
the other documentation.
That's correct. The filing of the 485 and the issuance of that receipt and the pending nature of that case and the EAD card that's associated with that basically takes the place of the F1 that you were previously on. And that's true of F1s, it's true of H1s, it's true of L1s. Anybody like that moves into that 485 stage, you are not required to maintain underlying status. Often it's not even possible to maintain it, and there's no need to.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that. And just a quick reminder for anyone who is working with Vima or Valley at this time, and you have a very case-specific question, do email that to me, Roxy, at rmoser@vmstaffing.com. Many of you have my email, and I'll make sure that we can follow up. We won't have time to necessarily go over specific individual case questions. Okay, so
Mike, let me just ask Mike about another question in here is for Canadians with no I-94 who are, traveling in the United States, maybe on a TN or something. What's the requirement for the fingerprinting, which seems to be in the news?
TNs should all have I-94 card records. So if you're on a TN, you should have an I-94. The only place that's still issuing paper TNs, paper I-94s, are a couple of land border places. One in, I think there's 3 left from what I've heard. One actually in Montana that a lot of people use. But everyone else should have the digital, the electronic, where once you come in, you go to the CBP website, put in your passport number is the easiest way to get it, and then you can download it. So you should have an I-94. The only people who don't get I-94s when they come in are tourists. You get waved in, you're traveling by car kind of a thing. Even if you're traveling by plane, you still get one. If you're traveling by car, often you don't. The idea behind those is you shouldn't be here over 30 days. So the registration rule doesn't kick in for you. And you wouldn't be working, so you're not really part of our population, but that's the answer.
Right. Okay. So for
Thanks, Mike.
work specific visas, I-94s would be granted because you're getting your work visa at the border.
That's
Okay. And you know what? I see one more coming through that is relevant here, which is our visa is expired and we only have the I-20. Should we worry? We are barely
correct.
getting our OPT, which I assume
Yeah,
means
that's not
before
a
it
worry at
expires.
all. Your visa, the stamp in your passport, it does not control legal status whatsoever. It only controls your ability to travel into the US. Once you're into the US, it's your I-94, which likely says D/S, which stands for duration of status. That means you do not have an expiration date. And then it's your I-20. So you are in legal status by virtue of having a DS I-94 card and a valid I-20. That's what gives you status. And that's
Very,
100%
helpful.
perfectly safe.
Great. Thank you. Okay, well, let's review where we are with retrogression. Specifically, Mike, I would love for you to discuss, dissuade, addressing any concerns that those who have not yet been sponsored may or may not have about getting sponsorship, and then certainly going over what the state of the visa bulletin is and what might be delaying the processing of these visas.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the easy and the most straightforward answer is there's absolutely no roadblock, prohibition, more difficulty, any of those kinds of negative things today around an EB3 filing, a TN filing, or an E3 filing than what we had 6 months ago, 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, et cetera. Okay, so there's nothing changed. They're all perfectly viable options to the US. What has changed in the last couple of years, particularly, and this is relevant to EB3 processing, the most common for RNs, is retrogression, is the fact that there is a line. Retrogression simply means there is more people in line than we have for green cards. And we're going to, in a second, I think, go to another screen that shows the visa bulletin. But let's go back just for 1 second. Let's hit that third point of what's taking longer right now. Processing times of I-140s filed under the regular process are currently taking significantly longer than they were a year from now. Right now, I walked around and checked with my staff, and they're seeing 14, 15, 16 months. Okay. The USCIS is not even allowing service requests until after the 1 year mark. That is significantly longer. Does that bother us all? Absolutely. Why? We'd like to have an answer, right? Because we all like answers for everything. However, here's an important point to make sure you understand. Since retrogression is taking longer than the visa processing, and by the way, Roxy is now purple. I love that.
Okay, well, hopefully it will come back.
It was like a disco Roxy. It's like purple. We just needed a little music from the 70s, and you could spin and twirl, and then I would do the same. But you just do not want to see me and Conley dancing.
I mean, I'm just in Willy Wonka's factory right now. I don't know. It happens all the time.
Yeah,
Sorry for the distraction.
Amazing. So, no. So the length of retrogression, the time it takes you to get from the day you file to the time you can file your 485, or if you're overseas, the time you can go to the consulate, is longer than the time it's taken to process the I-140, which means how long it takes to process the I-140 is not relevant, because you get your priority date not when your case is approved, but when your case is filed. So if I file a case today, March 20, whatever today is, 25th or 26th,
26.
March 26th, that's my priority date. And I know that they're not processing cases here in the US until people who have a priority date of March 1st, 2023. So I'm not anywhere close to the front. So whether I get an approval in 2 months, 8 months, 16 months, makes no difference whatsoever. So processing times, we can easily go legally and practically make no difference. The other thing to keep in mind is If for some reason we get a situation like we did 5 years ago, where all of a sudden processing time or the a visa bulletin accelerated quickly, you can still file a 485 with a pending I-140 if a priority date's current. Okay, so there's no reason to premium process an I-140 today. Interviews. It's the second point on this. I'm working backwards, obviously. Yeah, dyslexia or something. Interviews. I-45s are the idea, the expectation is they're going to all have interviews again. Interviews used to be very common. Every 485, family and employment-based, had personal interviews. That was in the old days, back when I was, going to interviews. Then they went away with interviews for probably about 8 or 10 years and only randomly had them. Interviews returned during the first Trump administration. Then they got eliminated during COVID. And now we see interviews in maybe 1 out of 5 cases, 1 out of 10. So it's not that many, but there are some. It is likely that the Trump administration is going to reinstate interviews. That's going to mean 2 things for those of you in a 485 process. It means it's going to take longer, because that means your file is going to be mailed from a processing center over to a local office near where you're physically living in, say, LA, and you're going to get scheduled for a personal interview. So it's going to take longer just to go through those. It doesn't have anything to do with you might not get approved. It's just going to take a little longer. Last thing for RFEs. We have not yet seen an increase in RFEs. We saw a little bit of an uptick in November right after the election, mainly with H1 cases in the IT and engineering space. But since then, it's pretty settled down. Healthcare generally doesn't get RFEs anyway, because there's not a lot of moving parts in your cases. So RFEs right now are not a big issue. Okay, now let's go to the visa bulletin.
Okay. There you go.
Okay, so this is April's visa bulletin. Here's how you read this. Number 1, you need to know what country you were born in, not the country you're a citizen of, the country you were born in. So if you immigrated to Canada, you have a Canadian citizen, and you're working here on a TN, but you were born in China, you still need to go to the China chart, okay? So you know the country you're born in. If you're not born in China, India, Mexico, the Philippines, you're in the other category, okay? That a lot of people call ROI, rest of world, or other people will use the entire phrase, all chargeability. I just say the other category. Then you need to look down at the category you're under. First, second, third. These are all employment-based categories. That's where the phrase EB3 comes from. It's just the third category. If you're an RN, you're going to be in the EB3 category. If you're a PT, an OT, a doctor, a pharmacist, you're going to be in the EB2 category. Those are categories where the profession requires a graduate degree. You want to be an OT, you need at least a master's, maybe even a doctoral, and depending on the state you're in. So that's 2. And then 1 is there's really not healthcare occupations in EB1. So you're going to look at EB3, and then you're just going to go across the column. The chart we're looking at right now is called the final action date chart. So if I am born in the Philippines and I have a priority date of, let's say, December 1st, 2022, I am before the date on this final action date chart, which means if I'm overseas, I can have an interview scheduled for me, and it means that I can have my visa issued. If I'm here in the US, it means that my I-45 can be scheduled for an interview if I'm going to be subject to an interview, or it means I can be approved. And so that's what the final action date chart means. It means I can be adjudicated. It doesn't mean I'm getting approved today, but I can be adjudicated. Now, do we have the second chart up or not?
Do.
Okay. Second chart is the date for filing chart. The date for filing chart is March 1st. And again, you read it the exact same way, but it's March 1st, 2023. For April, the USCIS has announced they're not honoring the date for filing chart. The date for filing chart is almost always ahead of the final action date chart. That date, March 1st, 2023, was set in October. The reason October is important is because October is the beginning of the fiscal year. That's when we get new dates, new visa numbers. And so normally the date for filing is a date in the future. And normally during the course of the fiscal year, the final action date chart will move forward to meet the date for filing chart. So right now it's set at January 1st, 2023. We would expect over the next 2 to 3 months for it to move up to March 1st, 2023, if history is any predictor. Okay. I've already seen some Q&As in the Q&A about how far is the priority date chart going to move up to. That's the most favorite question I get whenever I do any of these. And I don't think it's going to move much past March 1st, 2023, this fiscal year.
For dates for filing.
No, I think that that it will move past for anything.
Okay.
March 1st, I think, will be the final date as far forward as we see.
Okay.
I think the next time it will move is in October. I could be wrong. I'd love to be wrong, but it's not likely to be the case. And then people want to know what's going to happen in October. And I have absolutely no clue. It's a total complete guess. And if you push me hard enough, I'll make something up, but it will have zero accuracy. And if your friend asks me tomorrow, I'll make something different up for him. So, but it's anybody's guess. Can we say 6 months? Can we say 3 months? I don't know. I'd love to say 6 months. I'd love to say that we overall, and here's the thing to keep in mind. Right now, we're at an overall processing time with retrogression from the time we get filed to the time we're able to be final adjudicated, sitting right around the 2.5 year mark, okay? If we go back historically, that's about where dates have been. So for the last 20 years, except for some short periods of time, one after COVID, that was recent, right? Only 4 years ago, 3 years ago, we had where dates were not like that. But if we go back before that, or back to 2008 or 2006, that's about what we've had. So in that 2.5, up to 3 range is historically where things have been over the last 20 years. So this is not an unusual time. The key, I think, for you is you got to take action and get in the queue. You got to get an I-140 file. You got to do that because that's what separates. If you look at the dates and go, oh my God, I don't want to wait 2.5 years, that's terrible, so I'm not going to move forward. And then 3 months later, you look at it again, you're now 3 months behind. Where if you would have just taken action, and again, it's okay to whine about it. I whine about it basically every day, sometimes multiple times a day. But at the end of the day, I got to take that action to get in the queue and get in line so that I'm at least moving forward.
Great. Thank you for that. I think
cover the visa bulletin.
I'm sorry?
That cover everything on the visa bulletin?
So far, I know
Okay.
we'll have questions. So let's move to the question portion. And, speaking of timeline and the 2.5 plus timeline to expect the wait to be to get your visa, there was a question earlier about visa screen and whether or not it makes sense to get that visa screen. Do you have any comments on that, Mike?
Sure. Visa screens are expensive, right? They cost like $1 million or something to get. I would be waiting as late as possible to do my visa screen to spend my money. You do not need a visa screen for the I-140 process. Okay? Totally irrelevant. And again, we're talking about U.S. candidates here. You've gone to a U.S. school, you were in F1, you know you're going to get the visa screen. There's not going to be issues about your education. There's not going to be issues about your English because you're exempt from that, and you're going to get it. And with U.S. education, it only takes a few months to get. Priority dates are not going to be current for 2 years, a 1.5 years to 2 at least. I would not file for my visa screen right after I get out of school. I would wait till you have a little extra money. Work some overtime shifts some weekend in the summer when everybody else wants to be off, and now you got some extra cash. And then file for your visa screen then. Keep in mind they're good for 5 years. So plenty of time to do it for those of you. For you offshore, different answer. But Roxy can help you with when's appropriate to file for the visa screen offshore. Takes longer, a little more moving parts, a little more things that you have to submit and fill in and things like that. A little more delays that could happen. But for U.S. candidates, U.S. grads, I'd just wait.
Okay, thank you. And just to reiterate, they are valid for 5 years. So some of the consular process folks getting that visa screen done knowing that there will be a wait for your visa interview to come up, but also being prepared is very important. And like Mike said, we can discuss that with you. Okay, so let's see here. Moving down the list from earlier.
There was a question about H-1B, I noticed, and we've discussed it to our groups in the past, but the question was, do you have any H-1B offers as bridge route to the U.S. while we wait for the EB-3 to become current? We do not. The H-1B is fraught with error and delay, and there's not a lot of facilities that are eligible for it. It is and we're not really sure what's going to be happening with the Trump administration and H-1Bs going forward, but it's really nothing that we've ever recommended for any candidate or even a client. So that's my position on it. Maybe Mike has something less draconian as I do.
No, I mean, I think the reality is there are just not many positions in the U.S. that qualify for H-1Bs for RNs. And so it is a dream for many because it's viewed as faster. And if it would work, it would be faster, but it just generally does not work. It also creates other practical issues. But before you even get to the practical issues, there's just not very many facilities and not many jobs that do in fact qualify. So.
Great. Thank you. We have a few more visa screen questions that just popped up. So a quick one. Do I still need a visa screen after the I-485 is filed?
You have to have a valid visa screen at the time of filing your 485. You also have to have a valid visa screen at the time of your adjudication. So if your visa screen expires from the time you filed to the time you get approved, you need to renew that visa screen. You need to review that visa screen until you have a green card in your hand.
And also they would need a visa screen when the dates for filing priority date for them becomes current, because you just correct. We need a visa screen
when
to
you're going to file the 485,
right?
You have to have it when you file the 485.
So that's a good point of reference for the date at which, as you look at the visa screen progress, you can have an idea of when you would need to have a valid.
If I had a priority date sometime in 2023 and I were here in the United States, I would be getting a visa screen. If I have a priority date 2024, I probably wouldn't.
Okay. Regarding the question, what do they look for in a visa screen? All of that information would be also available on the CGF&S visa screen website. There's plenty of information there that will show you and walk you through what you'll need to be filing for that visa screen. Let's see. What are options?
I would just, there's something, a very particular question here, but it's a scary question. And I think that there might be some people interested in the answer. And that is, what will happen for individuals with their temporary protected status and advanced parole work authorization that gets revoked? So let's say a Venezuelan nurse, for instance.
So let's pretend for a second that your humanitarian parole or your TPS is revoked, or the asylum program you're in is revoked, and you no longer have the ability to stay here in the U.S. and live and work. And the court decisions have not gone in favor. Trump wins in court, and you are out of status. You're going to need to leave the U.S. That does not end your I-140. okay, your I-140 continues to move on. So if you're approved and simply waiting for a priority date, it continues on waiting for a priority date. If you're pending and it hasn't even been approved yet, it stays pending. And then when your priority date becomes current, there would be decisions made as to what you can do from what we would refer to as consular processing. Now, we have not talked about this specific answer, so I'm going to give what I believe will happen, and then Mike, you can tell me that's completely wrong, and I'll, we'll go with what you say. But if you're a direct hire, and let's say you were sponsored by ABC Hospital, and today they have a job for you, okay? And you're working away, and all of a sudden your work authorization is canceled, and now you leave, okay? And let's say it takes 2 years for your priority date to become current again. In 2 years, in my opinion, what's going to happen is that you're going to talk to Mike and Roxy, and they're going to determine whether or not Hospital A, the one you were petitioned for, has an opening for you. Because now we're talking, they're trying to predict, do I have an opening for a med-surg nurse in 2027? Today, they don't know. They have no idea what's going on in 2027 in their world. Maybe the hospital's not even owned by the same hospital facility anymore. Somebody bought them, and now they're owned by someone else. They're going to make sure that there's something for you. It might not be that exact same facility, but here's what's really important to know. The priority date that's in your I-140 is yours. You own the rights, let's call it, to that priority date, which means you're already at the front of the queue with that petition. And let's pretend that hospital doesn't exist anymore. Let's say it went bankrupt and it went away. So that job doesn't exist. They can find you another job because the nursing shortage is not going to go away in the U.S. It's only getting worse, not getting better. So they're going to find something else for you that requires a filing of a new I-140, probably under premium processing, but you don't go back in the queue line. You just stay where you're at, and then you do your interview through the new hospital. That's historically what has happened when people have been, what the phrase everybody uses, abandoned, and it happens to offshore candidates from time to time. It happened in 2008, 2009 with the economic downturn, recession, depression, depending on what TV station you listen to. I think don't worry so much about what will happen. I think there's still a path for you, and I think your path will continue to move forward. So that's my answer. Again, the Mike Hammond answer, and Mr. Conley.
I'll give you the Mike Conley answer, and that is we have a number of times been approached by abandoned nurses for assistance, and we have gone and recaptured their priority dates and did the expedited filing for them, and we were able to save their case and get them to the United States and put them with a client that took good care of them. So even with our direct hire people, if they get here and they're getting, their hospital that they're signed up with has changed hands or gone out of business or whatever, we would do the exact same thing. We would recapture and find a client to make sure that you got to where you needed to be and where you wanted to be. So I just think that if you do not want to be out of status and stay in the United States, if you do it for too long, you would lose the opportunity to ever come back. You'll get deported and you'll never be able to re-enter the States. So God forbid your TPS gets revoked. If that happens, it's time to leave the country. There's options. You can go other places. You can go and work in England or Canada. They're happy to have you. But your case will be safe because we'll make sure you get to the end of the road.
Yes, thank you. And we only have another moment or so, but earlier in the hour, there was a question related about us, I think coming from someone who is not yet working for us, but It's related to the answer you just gave, which is it true that some of the facilities in the US will abandon us if we cannot reach them on a given specific time, since we cannot do anything about retrogression? That would not be the case for us. And Mike Conley, I'd love for you to take a
Yeah,
stab at that one.
it unfortunately, because of the length of time, things can happen. I mean, it's the nature of the world. Like Mike said, a hospital could be sold to another entity. It could go out of business. It could all of a sudden, when your priority dates are coming current, they're completely staffed. I mean, this happens, and there's always been this back and forth between agency and direct hire. Well, direct hire has some risks associated with that. Agency, they just can't wait to get you here because they're going to find a client for you. So, um, you know, because we do both, we're able to, we can do a direct hire for you. And if God forbid something happens, we'll still take care of you. We'll do the recapture ourselves, um, if need be, and make sure that you get where you need to be. So that's all I got.
Great. Thank you. We have run out of time, but I do just want to give both the mic, another moment to add any further comments or address anything else that you may have seen come through the Q&A. Mike Hammond.
Yeah, I would just quickly say that there's a lot of noise, a lot of stuff that makes it appear that things are very negative for immigration. And I don't want to diminish any of that that's happening. There are a lot of bad things happening to good people right now, okay? But if you look at your circumstances, for those of you who are, again, not on TPS or paroled in, asylum, nothing has happened. And the expectation is that nothing will happen. So let's make sure we're still focused. For those of you who are debating, do I file or don't I file? I say file. Control what you can control. Do the steps you can do. And the other stuff, whether retrogression or anything else happening, I can't control those things. I simply have to adjust to those, but I can control if I choose to move forward and file. That's it for me.
Thank you. Mike.
I would like to say, the Trump administration, it comes into town and it's rollicking and all sorts of stuff is flying around and fear mongering, etc. But they're concerned with illegal immigration. And that's where we see all of this stuff occurring. Legal immigration is still legal and supported by the current administration at this point. And I just think that, so long as we continue to do everything right, and, Mike's firm they're experts at this. They get people's paperwork proper. And we've been doing it for 22 years. So we kind of know what we're doing too. You all are law-abiding professionals. You should not have any issues so long as you take the precautions of making sure that you have your paperwork in order. So yeah, no, it's scary. I mean, if I was undocumented in the United States, I'd be nervous. But you're not, and you won't be. And so legal immigration is going to keep moving forward. And that's our focus, and that's what we're going to focus on with you. And America is it's a country built on immigration. And I can understand why some people feel it's important to get rid of illegal immigrants who are committing crimes. I think that's probably a good idea. But at the same time, it's a country that acknowledges that there's a big need for people that, provide the services that you all provide. And that's only going to be a bigger deal going forward as, you know, baby boomers retire and more pressure is put on the healthcare system. They're going to need more nurses. The shortage is not going away. It's getting worse. So Just keep working hard. Don't do crime.
Mhm.
That's a big one. Um, Stay away from drunk driving and smoking weed and being in favor of terrorism, and you should be fine.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you both so much for today. And thank you for everyone who's joined us. Um, as you see on the screen, our information, websites, and emails. Roxy email is in the chat, which is rmoser@vmstaffing.com for those who need to reach out about case specific questions. And then this webinar will be on our YouTube channel on the next day. So do go ahead and share it with whomever. We hope you found it helpful. We thank you for coming. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
Have a good
everyone.
one.
Thanks, Roxy. Thanks,
Bye.
Mike.
Yep, thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.